I will now call the January 22nd, 2018 Blue Springs City Council meeting to order. If you would stand with me, observe a moment of silence, and I will lead you in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You may be seated. I want to welcome you in the audience, as well as those that might watch this meeting on YouTube later. We also want to welcome back our former city attorney, who is filling in for our city attorneys on vacation, Bob McDonald. Welcome back, Bob.
Thanks. Thank you, Mayor. I'm glad I got to come once this year.
Yes. So far. He's done his quota so far. Once a year is about all he wants to come back. And I don't blame him, you know, when you're on vacation. I mean, when you're retired. Okay, so the next item is a consent agenda. Only two items there. Anybody don't want to pull that? I accept the motion for approval.
So moved.
The second.
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilman Kaler.
Aye.
Councilman Levesey.
Aye.
Councilman Fowler.
Aye.
Councilman Carter.
Aye.
Councilman Edmondson.
Aye.
Councilman Culpepper.
Aye.
Mayor Ross.
Aye.
Motion carries.
Next, we have a public hearing to annex two properties located at 1450 Southeast US 40 Highway.
Mayor, the city has the following exhibits to enter into the record. Council information form with attachments, community development packet, site location map, site aerial map, affidavit of publication in the Examiner on January 12, 2019, 185-foot notification map, name, addresses of property owners within 185 feet of site, a copy of letter sent to said property owners, the petition of voluntary annexation to the city of Blue Springs, Missouri with attachments, and bill number 4627. This is all we have to offer for the record.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mellon, on behalf of the city.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the City Council. Mike Mallon with Community Development. Tonight is a public hearing being held at the request of the property owner for consideration to approve annexation of two properties. The first of which is 0.10 acres in size, and the other is 0.66 acres in size approximately, located at 1450 Southeast US 40 Highway into the city limits of Blue Springs. As you can see on the map here, the properties are highlighted by the black and white dashed line. The property for annexation this evening is directly adjacent to the Casey Bobcat development project. The land for that was annexed previously this year, in 2018 on September 24th. These two parcels are being annexed to provide additional land for that property to be developed, in particular the south portion here. That is the smaller portion, the 0.10 acres, and the 0.66 acres runs north and south here, and that is being annexed so that it can be dedicated as a public street and right-of-way for the city. These two properties allow Casey Bobcat to pursue the development of the property for the outdoor equipment and sales and service land uses that they are proposing. Tonight is the first reading of the annexation. Should this be approved, the second reading would be scheduled for February 19th, 2019. Are there any questions?
Any questions, Mr. Mellon? Seeing none, is the applicant present? Like to make any comments? Seeing none. Okay, we'll go to the public. Is there one in the audience like to speak in support of? Anyone like to speak in support of? Opposition to? Opposition to? Close this public hearing. Anybody like to introduce it?
I'll introduce it, Your Honor.
Okay.
First reading of Bill Number 4627, an ordinance annexing .10 plus or minus and .66 plus or minus acres located on the south side of US 40 Highway and 1,500 feet east of Southeast Adams Dairy Parkway into the corporate boundaries of the city of Blue Springs, Missouri.
Move the bill be approved on its first reading and proceed with the second.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilman Levesey.
Aye.
Councilman Fowler.
Aye.
Councilman Carter.
Aye.
Councilman Edmondson.
Aye.
Councilman Culpepper.
Aye.
Councilman Kaler.
Aye.
Mayor Ross.
Aye.
Second reading of Bill Number 4627, an ordinance annexing .10 plus or minus.
Oh, we're
Oh.
waiting for the next.
I'm
yeah.
sorry, yes.
I knew that was the reason we brought Bob back tonight. So the next reading will be February, second
February
reading?
4th, 2019.
Okay. So we'll move on. We did we vote? Okay, well, let's move on to the next item.
I just wanted to clarify that the next reading would be February 19th.
I'm sorry, 19th. February 19th, 2019.
Okay.
Thank you.
Is it all clear? Okay. Next, we have a public hearing to rezone 3421 Northwest Jefferson Street.
City has the following exhibits to enter into the record: council information form with attachments, staff report with attachments, affidavit of publication in the Examiner on December 29th, 2018, application with attachments, 185-foot notification map, names and addresses of property owners within 105 feet of site, copy of letter sent to said property owners, Title 4 Land Use Section, Blue Springs Code of Ordinances by reference, and 2014 Comprehensive Plan by reference, and Bill Number 4628. This is all we have to offer for the record.
Okay, Madam, behalf of the city.
All right, thank you, Mayor and Council. Before this evening is a request to rezone property located at 3421 Northwest Jefferson Street from LI Light Industrial to GB General Business. The subject property covers approximately 0.53 acres and includes an existing vehicle repair limited business and a former office space, tenant space. The applicant, Winship Brewery, is requesting the zoning to change the tenant space from office to a bar tavern use. The general business zoning district would allow both the vehicle repair limited use and the bar tavern use to be in compliance with the UDC. The comprehensive plan does designate the subject property as corridor reinvestment and neighborhood retail. The subject property is the only property located along Northwest Jefferson Street within 1,000 feet of Woods Chapel Road that is currently zoned light industrial. All other properties were zoned either general business or regional commercial. The proposed bar tavern use will operate out of a small portion of the existing building, and the current configuration of the parking does have enough parking to accommodate both land uses on the site. The proposed rezoning is in line with the future land use designation for the property in the comprehensive plan, and therefore staff does recommend approval of the rezoning request. The Planning Commission did hold a public hearing on Monday, January 14th, and also recommends approval of rezoning request. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Are there any questions on Matt? Seeing none, thank you.
I got a question for you. Is this just going to be a brewery, or is it going to serve drinks in the brewery?
It'll be a brewery, and they'll have a small bar area inside.
Okay.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, thank you, Matt. Is the applicant present? Like to come be sworn in and make any comments?
Raise your right hand. You solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this case will be the truth, so help you God.
I do.
Need your name and address.
Thank you, Mayor, council members. My name is Tony DiPlacido. I live at 706 Northeast Hunters Road here in Blue Springs. I've been a resident of Blue Springs for about 25 years now, and I currently work for Jefferson Service Center, which is in this location. I am also the head brewer for Apex Ale Works in Independence. The concept for the brewery is to create a small space that will allow craft beer enthusiasts to come and sample small batch artisanal ales and lagers, and then be able to purchase growlers and crowlers to go on the weekend. Locally, BKS Artisan Ales in Brookside has the same format. It's become really popular in St. Louis, and so I'd like to bring it to Blue Springs.
Any questions from the council? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
For your testimony. Let's go to the audience. Anybody in this audience like to speak in support of? In support of? Opposition to? Opposition to? Close this public hearing. Introduction?
I'll introduce Your Honor.
Okay.
Is she going to read it first?
Who was it? Just pick somebody.
First reading of Bill Number 4628, an ordinance rezoning property from light industrial to general business.
Move the bill be approved on its first reading.
Is there a second?
This. Are we proceeding with the second tonight? Yeah.
Oh, this one we are.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I said we proceed on the other one. And now
Sure
we're
you would like us to.
And proceed with this second reading.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
No, we can't do that. We gotta go back to the roll call, please.
Okay, Councilman Fowler.
Aye.
Councilman Carter.
Aye.
Councilman Edmondson.
Aye.
Councilman Culpepper.
Aye.
Councilman Kaler.
Aye.
Councilman Levisay.
Aye.
Mayor Ross.
Aye.
Mayor, motion carries.
Yeah, it does. Second reading?
Second reading of Bill Number 4628, an ordinance rezoning property from light industrial to general business.
Move the bill be approved on second reading, given the appropriate ordinance number.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Councilman Carter.
Aye.
Councilman Edmondson.
Aye.
Councilman Culpepper.
Aye.
Councilman Kaler.
Aye.
Councilman Levisay.
Aye.
Councilman Fowler.
Aye.
Mayor Ross.
Aye.
Given ordinance number 4787.
We have the last of the public hearings. Vacate a 10-foot utility easement located at 2000 Northwest Ashton Drive.
The city has the following exhibits to enter into the record. Staff report with attachments, affidavit of publication in the Examiner on December 29, 2018. Application with attachments, 185-foot notification map, names and addresses of property owners within 185 feet of site. Copy of letters sent to said property owners, Title IV Land Use Section, Blue Springs Code of Ordinances by reference, and 2014 Comprehensive Plan by reference, and Bill Number 4629. This is all we have to offer for the record.
Okay, Matt, you're still up.
All right, thank you, Mayor and Council. Before you this evening is a request for vacation of a 10-foot utility easement on the Blue Springs High School campus at 2000 Northwest Ashton Drive. The easement is generally located at the southwest corner of the current high school building. A proposed building addition will be within the existing easement and therefore needs to be vacated prior to the new addition being permitted. Currently, only underground electric is located within the portion of the easement that is requested to be vacated. The applicant has already made plans with KCP&L to relocate the electrical line around the new building addition. No other utilities are currently in the easement, and all utilities have responded to the request. Staff recommends approval of the vacation, subject to 2 staff conditions in the staff report. And then the Planning Commission held a public hearing last Monday, January 14th, and also recommended approval of the vacation. Be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions on Matt? Yeah, Councilman Kaler.
At one time, the police department had an antenna on that, in that area. Is that still true?
I believe the applicant can answer that. The only thing that was in there was the electrical line. It's not the full easement. I'll bring up the exhibit. It's just a portion of the easement that's being vacated.
Okay.
So they're not, basically not taking out the pole that's there for this addition. Is that correct?
Well, we'll have the applicant come up
Yeah.
after
Okay.
and see if they can answer that question. Okay, any other questions of Matt? Seeing none, thanks, Matt. School district representative, should you come up, be sworn in?
Raise your hand. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give in this case to be the truth, so help you God?
Good evening. My name is Jason Wolf, at 1521 Southwest Trail Ridge Drive here in Blue Springs with the Blue Springs School District. Thank you for having us tonight. With our bond issue, part of this construction with our new band area, along with a new gymnasium that we'll be putting in and a new library to enclose the campus. This is what's causing this to be relocated. And if you have any questions, I know I have Hollis and Miller here and the engineers that would be happy to answer any of those questions that you might have.
Mr. Kaler, you want to?
Yes, sir. Question is that the power pole there will be, then my understanding is going to be moved, correct?
James Ratley, MKEC, address is 11827 West 112th Street, Suite 200, Overland Park. All that line, the portion of that line's being removed to be relocated is all underground. There is no pole there.
Right, okay.
So there's no power pole or anything to be affixed to it for like a
Okay.
signal or whatever, or tower or a satellite, whatever you use.
And it's moving towards,
It's just being relocated and tied back in just to get around the building.
okay.
Yep.
Anyone else have any questions of our school district representatives? Seeing none, thank you for coming. Appreciate it. We go to the audience. Anyone in the audience like to speak in support of? Support of? Opposition to? Opposition to? Close the public hearing. Anyone like to introduce it?
I'll introduce it, Your Honor.
First reading of Bill Number 4629, an ordinance vacating an existing 10-foot utility easement with an address of 2000 Northwest Ashton Drive in Blue Springs, Missouri, Blue Springs, Jackson County, Missouri.
Third time's a charm. Move the bill be approved on its first reading and proceed with the second.
Is there a second?
Second.
Is there any discussion?
Got it
Good job, Ron.
Roll call, please.
Councilman Edmondson?
Aye.
Councilman Culpepper?
Aye.
Councilman Kaler?
Aye.
Councilman Levisay?
Aye.
Councilman Fowler?
Aye.
Councilman Carter?
Aye.
Mayor Ross?
Aye.
Second reading of Bill Number 4629, an ordinance vacating an existing 10-foot utility easement with an address of 2000 Northwest Ashton Drive in Blue Springs, Jackson County, Missouri.
Move the bill be approved on second reading, given the appropriate ordinance number.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Councilman Levisay?
Aye.
Councilman Fowler?
Aye.
Councilman Carter?
Aye.
Councilman Edmondson?
Aye.
Councilman Culpepper?
Aye.
Councilman Kaler?
Aye.
Mayor Ross?
Aye.
Given ordinance number 4789.
Next, we have introduction and reading of Bill 4630, approving the final plat for the estates at Chapman Farms.
I'll
third
introduce it, Your
plat.
Honor.
Okay.
First reading of Bill Number 4630, an ordinance approving final plat for the estates at Chapman Farms, third plat, lots 78 through 112, and Tract G, replat of part of Lot 35 of Chapman Farms, first plat.
Move the bill be approved on its first reading and proceed with the second.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? Roll call.
Councilman Kaler.
Aye.
Councilman Levisay.
Aye.
Councilman Fowler.
Aye.
Councilman Carter.
Aye.
Councilman Edmondson.
Aye.
Councilman Culpepper.
Aye.
Mayor Ross.
Aye.
Second reading of Bill Number 4630, an ordinance approving final plat for the estates at Chapman Farms, third plat, lots 78 through 112, and Tract G, replat of part of Lot 35 of Chapman Farms, first plat.
Move the bill be approved on second reading, given the appropriate ordinance number.
Is there a second?
Second.
Discussion?
Yes, Your
Roll call. Oh, yes. Councilman Fowler.
Yes, Your Honor. I'd just like to say I see the applicant's representative out here, Kevin. And the estates at Chapman Farms has just been a huge investment down south. If you've not seen that subdivision, go take a look at it. Really appreciate everything y'all are doing down there. Thanks.
I drive through there quite a bit, and kind of a slow start, but man, just mushroomed. Every time I go out there, I'm amazed at the houses that have gone in there. Mm-hmm.
I will say, I want to say thank you to all of you and the Planning Commission, because I don't know if you remember, but when we bought this and tried to relaunch it, the original requirements were 2,600 main level square footage, which at that time was never going to happen. And so you guys graciously understood and heard our case for dropping that minimum square footage to 1,700 main level for ranch plans. And at the time, I told you, traditionally what you see is during the down market to turn things around, you drop the square footage, and then over time, the market will take it up, and that's exactly what's happened down there. Our average square footage down there is probably 2,700 to 3,200 now. So just want to give that plug for future reference in a down market. That strategy is a good strategy. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
If I recall, during that conversation, we said we didn't want cookie cutter homes in there.
You did.
And it's not cookie cutter.
Yeah, you
they're
did.
pretty diverse, so.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, where are we? Roll call.
Second
Okay.
reading.
Okay. Councilman Levisay.
Aye.
Councilman Fowler.
Aye.
Councilman Carter.
Aye.
Councilman Edmondson.
Aye.
Councilman Culpepper.
Aye.
Councilman Kaler.
Aye.
Mayor Ross.
Aye.
Given ordinance number 4789.
Next, we have a couple of presentations. The first one is a CHAT study, and we're going to go to Tom.
Great. Mayor, members of the City Council, thank you for the time this evening. Tonight, Marty Schukert with RDG Planning and Design will be providing you and briefing you on the results and the findings of the CHAT study that was recently completed. CHAT simply means Community Housing Assessment Tool, which we refer to that as a CHAT study. I'd also like to just publicly thank KCPL, soon to be known as Evergy Energy Inspire Gas Services, for underwriting this particular project and the cost of this study. The original study was commissioned in 2006. We're very fortunate that RDG was able to perform the study again for us, as they have firsthand knowledge of the community and its advancement since the original study was done in 2006. The intent of the study really is to provide an analysis of existing housing stock, housing types, affordability, and desirability compared to trends and forecasting both locally, regionally, and nationwide. It also provides an analysis of market availability versus demand and the types of housing currently in demand in this region and nationwide. The information garnered from the study will ultimately be utilized and referred to in future land use plans, comprehensive plans, and as a reference when considering and evaluating plans and proposals for new developments within the city of Blue Springs. With that in mind, I'll turn this over to Marty, and he can provide the findings of the study.
Advance it. Oh, there's my mouse. Okay, I can do that. Mr. Mayor, members of the council, I'm Martin Schukert of RDG Planning and Design. It's been a great pleasure to be in the community again after 13 years. We first visited Blue Springs, well, I would come through all the time, but we first visited in detail in the 2006 CHAT study. And it's always interesting to come back a number of years later and to see the progress and changes that have taken place. So we're grateful to have that opportunity, and hopefully you will find the update of that study to be interesting and helpful. When we think about a community like Blue Springs and its current situation, we look at a number of factors, including population and income. In view of the time, we're not going to go into great detail on that. But I do want to give you a sense of some key trends in the city that I think you'll find interesting. We know that the city has grown at a moderate but healthy rate. Blue Springs over the long term has experienced an annual growth rate of about 1.08%, which is a healthy growth rate. In fact, it's a very good one because it means that you don't get behind the curve in terms of dealing with development. But it's interesting to go a little bit beyond and below those figures. And we found in looking at migration patterns and comparing projected population for various age groups by the actual counts that we can be able to quantify through the American Community Survey, which is the updated census estimates, that we have experienced overperformance, more people than we expected, in two significant age groups. One is people who are between 25 and 34. That, combined with a higher than expected number of young kids, indicates that Blue Springs has been attractive to young households, and that that's a significant past and continuing market in the future. We also found an overperformance, that is more people than we expected, in the senior population, that is people between 75 and 84 in 2017. We found a little bit of a drop-off or an underperformance in the kind of advanced middle age groups from 45 to 65. So interesting to look at those kinds of trends in terms of what's needed. We project that a continuation of the current historic growth rate that the city has experienced, both in the short and the long term, generates a population of about 57,000 by 2020 and a population of about 63,500 by 2030. And so we've used that sequence to project future needs. You'll see in just a couple of minutes that although the city over the last several years has increased housing production, it's still not quite keeping up with demand. And that problem is especially significant in the area of rental housing. And that, we think, is an area of significant concentration as we think about current trends, which tend to, over the last 10 years, have tended to favor renter occupancy over owner occupancy, oddly enough. So here you can see the historic housing development in Blue Springs. You can see very clearly the depression in housing production that took place between 2009, 2011, and a rather healthy recovery of that in the last 3 to 5 years. But that yellow bar is the number of as-built multifamily units, which is not very large over this 10-year period. Now, when we look at the period from 2000 to 2017, we find something that's really quite different, and that is a rather large increase in the number of rental occupied units. So if we compare renter occupancy growth and owner occupancy growth from 2000 on to 2017, which is the last year that we've got reasonable data, we find that we have added about 900 owner occupied units, but about 1,200 rental occupied units. And we also know that new construction is considered, of multifamily kind of as-built rentals, are far below that number. That tells us that there is demand for rental housing in Blue Springs, but that housing and that demand is often and generally fulfilled by conversion of single-family units to rental occupancy. And that's a critical issue. The rental demand is there. If we don't have the multifamily production, that is projects that are specifically built for rental occupancy, the market finds itself in other ways, and those ways are not necessarily what you might want to see. They're not necessarily friendly to primarily owner-occupied neighborhoods, and not necessarily friendly to the condition of housing. So we conclude from that analysis and from other things that people have told us, and by the way, this update was done with the help of many different constituencies, including builders, developers, banks, community organizations, the public sector, people who have a real stake in housing development. That becomes a very significant issue as we look at the future. We find that compared to other communities in the Kansas City metro area, that housing is relatively affordable in Blue Springs. That we have we like to take a comparative view of median housing value against median household income, and a ratio of about 2.5 to 3 is kind of the sweet spot. Above 3, the overall market is pretty unaffordable. Below 2, it's an undervalued market. So Blue Springs is quite competitive in terms of overall housing affordability in the Kansas City metro area. And yet we still continue to have a relative oversupply, as it were, of higher cost housing. We have a number of people who can afford, in other words, we have a number of people who can afford to live in more expensive houses, who, for reasons that are entirely understandable, that is, good bargains, not very much in the way of monthly housing costs, who live in lower valued units. So that translates to a pretty high level of housing affordability for most, but not all people in the housing market. So we see a need for, as we look at the numbers and at the income distributions, a real need for rental housing, a need for new units across all price ranges and all sectors of the community, including continuing projects like Chapman Farms that are serving a somewhat higher cost market. What does this mean in terms of housing production? Well, based on our population assumptions, we anticipate an annual need for something in the range of 230 to 250 units per year. We are averaging over the last few years about 180 to 200. So we're not far off, but still underperforming a little bit. Let's go back, go back, go back. That always happens to me. But, yeah, use the arrows to go back. Of those, of that demand, we are projecting that about 65% of the units will need to be owner occupied, about 35% renter occupied as we move forward. We're not wearing the, okay. Oh, we're out of the slideshow is the problem.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, that's right. We're now in the editing version. Okay, now, sorry about that. You'll see as well that, as I mentioned earlier, those needs fall across a broad spectrum of housing ranges. When we talk about affordable, low-cost owner-occupied housing, we're primarily talking about rehabilitation of existing units, but you can see significant needs across the more moderate and even higher end number of units. You can also see a very significant need in something that we really have not built in Blue Springs in past years, and that is market rate rental development. Again, we have not really we've not really seen that happen. So those are kind of the overall goals that we're trying to shoot at numerically in terms of the market. Now let's look at the analysis a little bit at resources and issues. I'll skip over these fairly quickly, again, in the interest of time, but wanted to identify some of the things that we've seen over the last 12 years as somebody who really has been Rip Van Winkle-like, not involved in thinking about the housing sector, Blue Springs, for a number of years, and then come back out of sleeping and seeing what's been done. One significant change was referred to earlier with projects like Chapman Farms and the other developments on the south side of the city. In the 2006 study, we identified together a significant need for market rate and higher end housing. That is really being fulfilled in a lot of ways, and the new developments and subdivisions on the south side of the city are testimony to that. We were impressed in our focus group that dealt with developers and builders at the energy and creativity of that sector of the market. That's a real asset. The activity and interest in downtown and the areas around downtown, the Old Town Historic District, is also very noticeable. And the developments of infill small lot single family development in and around downtown is a very positive development for reasons not just in terms of revitalizing a neighborhood, but for reasons of markets that we'll talk about in a few minutes. Old Town reinvestment outside of downtown is very noticeable. The downtown looks far better than it did in 2006, and significant opportunities exist there. But ultimately, a significant area of opportunity is demographic. That is, we are coming to a critical kind of transition where not only do we continue to need rental housing because of various preferences and the fact that younger households often don't have the equity to put into housing, and that generates a demand for transitional rental housing before they get to the point of buying a house. But also with millennials in particular, we're reaching a point where families are establishing households, they're having kids, and will be increasingly demanding, number one, owner-occupied housing that's family-friendly, and number two, given contemporary preferences, owner-occupied houses that also are walkable and have reasonable access to services around. So that demographic opportunity of addressing the issues of affordable housing that meets the needs of families and households with young children is a significant emerging possibility and opportunity for Blue Springs. and one that Blue Springs is very well positioned strategically to take advantage of with an excellent school system that is a real attractor to the community, with nice parks and open space resources, with a lot of other tremendous community assets. On the other side of the fence, the housing challenges include a lack of availability of existing housing stock. As you can see from these charts, we have a real drop in both the number of units that are available on the market. That's that blue bar to the left. The green bar's prices, those are going up, not surprisingly, and a fairly drastic decrease that relates to this in the average sales days on the market. So that equates to not very many houses on the market, and when they are on the market, they sell very quickly, bespeaking, again, a need for development and construction, particularly at the affordable ends of the scale. We have a lack of multifamily production. There are a few new projects, but we know, and you know from sitting through a lot of public hearings, that multifamily development is controversial. It presents a number of problems, a good amount of neighborhood opposition, and that discourages developers who are active in the multifamily area from getting involved in the Blue Springs market. Related to that is the ongoing debate about density. Is density good or bad? Well, yeah, everybody's right there. It's good in its place. It's bad if you don't like it and you're used to low density environments. The key is finding the places where we can locate higher density development in supportive neighborhoods that in one way or another avoid fights and provide predictability to potential developers. Infrastructure, as always, is a major concern. People think that developers make money on subdivisions through land development and infrastructure development. They don't, and they're at significant risk for doing that. In order to build the kind of housing and new production that we're looking for outside of infill areas, often some form of risk sharing or incentive structures become very important. There are a variety of housing types, including service provided senior living, transitional housing, affordable housing, and so forth, that are outside of the comfort zone of most home builders. And it's very difficult for those builders to comfortably serve those emerging markets as well. So the aversion, again, totally understandable, that housing producers have of taking undue risks is a significant problem. You know, it's funny, usually when we think about capital markets, the people who take the greatest risk are entitled to the greatest reward in a normal capitalist operation. But in housing production, it's exactly the opposite. Building a custom, expensive house for a fixed cost to an owner-occupant who you know carries the maximum return and the lowest risk, whereas building affordable housing for people you don't know has the highest risk and the least reward. So taken from a risk analysis point of view, it's we can understand why it's often very hard to get that kind of development built. Often this is done through the help of a community development corporation, a nonprofit that's specifically devoted to housing development. And that was a significant recommendation of the 2006 study, which we still really haven't met. There continue to be regulatory issues, even with the new Uniform Development Code and the institution of better contact between the development community and the city through roundtables. One of the most significant of those is the tying of T&D requirements to smaller lot single-family development. T&Ds are wonderful and create great environments, but they do have their expenses, which can be hard to amortize. So that is an issue to be thought through as well. How can we get the advantages and the principles of a T&D without necessarily all the literal requirements of a T&D? Downtown is developing, but we have corridors that are older corridors like Wood Chapel and the north part of Highway 7, or 7 highways you call it here in Missouri, that could actually become opportunities and development places for new housing. Finally, people in need. Blue Springs, like a lot of other places, are experiencing a growth in homelessness. In Blue Springs, that appears to be being met not very well in motels, in older motels. And there are some interesting national models that can address this problem in better and more effective and compassionate ways. So finally, in terms of directions forward, a look back indicates that a lot of progress has been made. One of the 06 recommendations was a community future and comprehensive plan. That's been done in 2014. A new downtown plan that considered housing as a major component. That's been done. Some action has been taken on corridor redevelopment. A few things remain to be done. A business and research park was a recommendation of the plan that's still being worked on. A neighborhood development or reinvestment corporation remains outstanding. And of course, you have introduced and enacted a new UDC. That's a very good document that continues to settle in. So in terms of thinking about policy moving forward, Blue Springs is a community that can serve multiple generations, from people who become vested in a community, to starting a household, to settling down, to becoming old. One of the big factors that we're still not exactly serving well is the middle-aged or somewhat not quite older adult, but not exactly starter household market. We think that a community development entity is still a very important kind of thing, and there's some specific project focuses that the report highlights. These include affordable independent living for seniors. The market is really has trouble producing that for moderate income or moderate wealth seniors. An innovative environment for the homeless to deal with that specific problem. A new workforce housing development that helps people transition from renter occupancy to owner occupancy and become vested in the community. So a couple of examples of projects you might find interesting. This is a project in my hometown, Omaha, that was developed by a nonprofit community development corporation called the Holy Name Housing Corporation. Originally a faith-based corporation that now has expanded into other areas. And it's a really beautiful senior compound, senior development project using attached units that were built with the assistance of low and moderate income housing tax credits through a CDC, and provides excellent senior housing as well as supportive community services. This project, in terms of homeless development, is a wonderful model that we have found a number of applications for, called Food and Shelter Village in Norman, Oklahoma, where people who are temporarily homeless are not housed in shelters or motel rooms, but rather in tiny houses. And very, very interesting and path-breaking project, largely supported both largely by philanthropic organizations and contributions. Finally, in terms of providing workforce housing that has an equity component to it, this program, also a Holy Name Housing Corporation program, shared equity program that allows people to, quote, rent, but build equity in a home that eventually converts to a down payment that eventually makes them owner occupants. So it's a transitional rent to own or renter to owner occupied program. In terms of multifamily development, we really think that one of the key problems is to provide predictable sites for developers to build multifamily development. The thing that scares people away, as potential developers told us, is uncertainty. Developing a plan, designing it, incurring all of the costs and then at the last minute not being able to get that project approved. The answer to that is to predefine and in some cases pre-zone areas that meet the standards for multifamily, that have the services, the walkability, the traffic infrastructure and so forth, and to establish those with site plan review, so it's not just an automatic approval, but with site plan review so that the issues of NIMBYs and fears and opposition just aren't there, that predictability is then offered to developers. Examples of that are South 7 Highway, along the highway corridor where there is abundant room, again, supporting services to provide a good buffer between the roadway and potential multifamily development. One thing that we're really excited about is looking at corridors as multifamily sites. If vacant sites or underused sites within former commercial corridors like parts of Wood Chapel that really can take residential development and create an internal market as well for commercial development in that corridor. Example of that is this project that actually is on the edge of a Target parking lot. This is in Minneapolis. A project that we are developing right now as a master plan is in Salina, Kansas, to develop something that we call corridor urbanism, which is using underused commercial sites and underused parking lots and developing new multifamily and single and even sometimes townhouse and single family development in those kinds of environments. Third, we think that it would be a good idea to update the downtown master plan, which has served very well and been a very good guide for development. But there are other sites now that begin to open up around the edges of downtown, around the edges of Main Street, including the site across the street from us on Smith Street that can have significant residential appeal. We suggest an incentive program by which the city may participate in infrastructure development for different forms of development that meets these kinds of needs that are not met when private developers have to 100% finance their infrastructure and just simply can't afford to do it. To work with developers to tweak the T&D requirements for small lot single family so that also becomes more attainable to build. So some examples again are in an area that we're working in, Fayetteville, Arkansas, really wonderful little small lot single family owner occupied development that in a pretty hot housing market is generating housing in $180,000 to $220,000 range. In our North Omaha redevelopment area, new construction that also on small lots that does not necessarily use rear-loaded or T&D standards. Higher density development that does meet T&D standards, providing owner occupancy opportunities at a density of about 16 units per acre, which becomes a very efficient sort of development form. In Excelsior Springs, a cottage project developed on the edge of downtown after we completed a comprehensive plan for that community. And finally, in Salina, the idea of a graduated public-private partnership that delivers affordable housing in the sort of more attainable ends of the housing price scale as a potential model to look at. So that, in a nutshell, are the directions and findings of the report. We've tried to focus in on really a few different kinds of things that would address a lot of the problems or issues that were identified during our stakeholder groups in the fall. And We know that, we're hoping that this will be useful to you, again, so that when we're here in 12 years, God willing, we can have a lot more green dots in the recommendations and see a lot of progress in this wonderful community. Thank you very much for your courtesy and attention, and I'll answer any questions if you have.
Are there any questions, Councilman?
Carter?
Yeah.
Okay. First of all, this is fascinating, and I hope that over the course of time we're going to dive into this and really chew on it and look at the recommendations and see what we can do. But you nailed it on the head when you talked about multifamily. There's a stigma in Blue Springs, maybe it's in other communities as well, that anytime there's a multifamily proposal that comes forward, this gallery will be full with opposition. They don't want it. In our comprehensive plan, the last time we redid it, I think the ratio was 70% single family to 30% multifamily.
That's about right.
Is that the right ratio?
Yeah. It's interesting because in 2000 it was 75-35. Now it's 70-30. So you can see that switch taking place to the degree that if you look solely at new housing units and added units from 2000 to 2017, it's about 55% renter and about 45% owner.
Well, my concern moving forward is that we don't have a diversity of housing, and everybody wants what we call SF7. They want the big single-family house, and that moving forward, as you point out, rightly so, with the demographic changes, we're going to need a lot of different kinds of housing.
That's
so thank you for the
right.
presentation.
Yep, thank you.
If I may, and I agree with Dale wholeheartedly on that. I think you hit a lot of it. In my district, District 2, which is the older part of town, and we talk about downtown, we've taken some steps and got some of those high-density single-family houses coming in. And I may not make people happy with this, but I think we're prime ready with some areas downtown where we can do some of that multifamily, where you do have maybe a business in front, parking underneath that, and then build up from there. 2-story, 3-story, taking advantage of some space that has been sitting empty for a long time and coming back with that. And maybe that's where we need to get involved and do a CDC or something along that lines, to where we incentivize what we want to put in there. Right. We can use the density down there, but control what kind of density is. Your assessment on the 70-30, that 30%, if you go back and look, and you talked about that, the number of new developments in multifamily, which would be, or paired family homes, however you want to call that, we're building less units. So what happens is, in the older part of Blue Springs, a lot of these houses are basically being turned into rental. They're picking up great values, turning them into rental. And then you have, in my neighborhood, it's the same thing. You know, you have a lot of nice houses, but then you have rentals, and it tends to affect the resale of those of the surrounding area. So the report is dead on. It's got some great things, and hopefully we take it to heart as a council and maybe address some of those issues where we need multifamily, but control what we're doing. Maybe stronger density instead of spreading it out into, paired family homes or duplexes. Maybe go to more of those underground or lower level parking, lower level business. Go up a couple of stories on it with multifamily. Come up with some new and fresh stuff. We haven't had much of that happening in a long time. So that's my viewpoint on it.
The irony is that when single-family owners oppose multifamily, and the multifamily rentals are accommodated in single-family neighborhoods, they're really working at odds with what they want. Right. And you're dead. Both of you are exactly right that we need to find higher density settings that are supportive and that get away from the conflicts you've experienced in the past, and areas like the urban central city where people are somewhat more tolerant of mixed densities, of the major road corridors, and also of even the older commercial corridors are all places where those opportunities exist. There's another interesting situation too, or another interesting idea, and that is dealing with multifamily as it transitions to single-family development. And I can't help but think about an area in Atlanta that I saw a few years ago when I was in Atlanta, Georgia, for the American Planning Association conference. There's a series of railroads that are being converted to what's referred to as the Beltline in Atlanta. And the first 3 miles of it has generated about $2 billion worth of development. The density in the Beltline is very high. It's something in the order of 60 to 100 units per acre in the multifamily areas. And the edge of this development area abuts a very historic, very well-organized single-family neighborhood. So what was built is very clever. On the opposite side of the street, a row of houses that absolutely match the historic houses on the opposite side were built, so that about 300 feet away, there's extremely high density from this well-organized single-family neighborhood, but you'd never know it was there because they managed the transition so well. And so getting into diversity of houses, of using transitional types of designs and actually stepping down is actually a way of taking kind of a form-based approach and to getting affordable production done.
Anyone else? Councilman Fowler?
Yeah, a couple quick points. A very exciting study, very well communicated. This is something that I hope we had an advanced copy so we could put it in the time capsule. Let people see that in like 2070 or so. And I do want to highlight one of the things that he mentioned, and that is designating some area where developers can do multifamily, because in defense of some of the citizens that show up here, they're saying, hey, for the past 15 years, I've invested in this area, and the land was zoned single family, and that's what they expect. And if a proposal comes in different, they definitely raise
Absolutely.
that flag.
Yeah,
I
would agree with Councilman Fowler. I think what we've said with most of the multifamily project is it's a great project, it's just in the wrong place.
Wrong place.
Yes, and so if we can maybe designate some of those areas. I know I've received calls from developers saying, hey, I want to do this project, and I'm scared that we're going to go through all the paperwork and we're not going to get it approved. So I'm sensing that hesitancy as well.
Right.
And my biggest, I guess, disappointment in your presentation here is I'm moving aged brackets here on your slideshow here in this year. So I'm scared to move it. I think what'd you call it, advanced middle age? I'm
Advanced
scared to
middle
move into that.
Yeah, I used to consider myself a senior in training, but I've gotten beyond that too.
That training part drops off pretty quick,
Yeah,
doesn't
right.
it?
Anyone else?
Your Honor, I agree with the thought of having designated areas in advance. I would tell you, as has been said, you come into a neighborhood and then all of a sudden say, well, you know, 1 block over, we're going to start putting in high density.
Right.
That's not going to fly.
Right.
It's just not going to fly. Right. But I think as long as people know in advance, you know, be forewarned before they purchase property. But we're very limited on how much property would fall into that category that we can redesignate. Mm-hmm. I also found it very interesting. You talked about developing an independent development corporation, and we just pulled that back in-house because they were not successful. So it would be interesting to see what your thoughts were on why that was not successful, because having pulled it back in-house, we are having more success.
I don't exactly know what happened. Or, I mean, we didn't pick up on that, on that issue during our visit. So maybe we could talk about that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, they're not always, the CDCs are not always successful, but and usually when they're not successful, it's because they're undercapitalized, and in some cases understaffed, and usually those two things go together. There'll be people who have good intentions and are and yet they don't know how to develop housing or how to administer a program, and that may or may not have been the problem. Often the best CDC director is a developer who made a lot of money and retired young.
Well,
Because
ours
they know
was
the business.
primarily economic development.
Yeah.
But to me, it all ties hand in
Yeah.
hand.
Yeah.
Mr. Johnson?
Your Honor, Marty, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
And it's hard to believe that we did this 13 years ago, and I'm like, where has the time gone?
No.
Did you ride your bike here tonight?
No, it's in my car for some
Okay.
stupid reason, but,
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
let's
so-
watch out for the potential ice.
Yeah, right.
And thank you, and I want to thank our corporate partners who, again, KCP&L and Spire, who helped underwrite this study. Appreciate their partnership with us, so thank you.
Thank you very much.
No one else?
Mr. Mayor.
Yes, Councilman Cagle.
Ditto.
I think your presentation met with approval. Thank you. And certainly gives us a lot to digest and hopefully respond accordingly.
My pleasure.
We have one other presentation, the presentation on Hero Fund USA. Darrell Smith.
Mayor and members of City Council, it's my pleasure to introduce Darrell Smith, CEO of Hero Fund USA, which is located right here in Blue Springs, and they provide funding for personal protective equipment for our first responders located in this region.
Thank you. Honorable Mayor and members of the City Council, my name again is Darrell Smith. I'm a resident of 1412 Southwest 25th Street here in Blue Springs, and have been for more than 25 years, and considered an honor to live in Blue Springs. About 2 years ago, in fact 2 years ago, the day after Christmas at the end of 2016, I, along with a couple of other dear friends of mine that were longtime supporters of a nonprofit organization I worked for over 30 years, met over coffee one day and decided there was a tremendous need for an organization that would provide incremental funding to help provide safety equipment for our first responders throughout Missouri and Kansas. And from that first meeting in November, we met the day after Christmas with Vicki Jack here in Blue Springs on Main Street, and we incorporated Hero Fund USA, filed our articles of incorporation with the Secretary of State's office, and we also registered at that time as a statewide organization in Kansas. So we consider ourselves a bi-state organization, Missouri and Kansas, primarily focused in the greater Kansas City metropolitan area. Whenever there's a line of duty tragedy, the first thing the community does, and God bless everybody for doing so, is they rally around that family that has lost a loved one who is a first responder that was tragically killed or critically injured in the line of duty. And we applaud the communities and the individuals and the caring businesses and organizations that support them. And our organization does do that. In fact, we call ourselves, you'll see on the brochure we distributed earlier, we call ourselves Hero Fund USA, and our corporate slogan is the first responder's first responder. The reason we do that is because not only are we there within 24 to 48 hours after a tragic line of duty incident to help that family financially with support, we also want to be there before a tragedy occurs to buy preventive measures to keep bad things from happening. We believe our first responders deserve every right to go home to their loved ones at the end of their assignments, as each of us do. So that is the mission of Hero Fund USA. We are based here in Blue Springs, Missouri, along the South Outer Road. We are right now, as I mentioned, are a bi-state organization, Missouri and Kansas. We have plans in the next 5 to 10 years to expand our mission to include safety funding for first responders in all the surrounding states around that border on Missouri and Kansas, which includes my original home state of Arkansas. And our ultimate goal is within 10 to 15 years to be a nationwide organization, but our intent is always to be a Blue Springs-based organization. You will also see a sheet we distributed earlier. This shows within the first 18 months or so of our existence as an organization that we helped 7 first responder families in the last year and a half, 6 line of duty deaths, 1 critical injury. We've also helped better than a half a dozen departments, first responder departments, police departments, and other law enforcement agencies, firefighters, fire departments, and emergency medical services personnel throughout our service area, which is Missouri and Kansas. Presently, today, we have 24 pending requests for financial assistance with safety equipment on the part of departments primarily around the state of Missouri. Our big challenge is twofold. Number one is people knowing who we are as an organization, and I appreciate Councilman Livesey and Councilwoman Culpepper having both invited us to do a presentation, and so we are here tonight, and thank you, Mayor Ross, for allowing that to happen. So we're building our public awareness through public service announcements. We have some former retired Royals players, some of whom live here in Blue Springs, that have done public service announcements for us. As the word gets out through our funding of safety equipment, we know that word will continue to expand. And our second greatest need is, as I mentioned, we have 24 pending requests for financial assistance with safety equipment today. And the total dollar amount of those requests is for about $301,000 worth of funding. And we have about $21,000 in our bank account today. So the need is there, and we know that we will meet those needs. We are a can-do organization. We are a volunteer organization governed by an 8-member board of directors, and in fact, Police Chief Munns here in Blue Springs, we're honored to have him serve as a volunteer member of our board of directors. And so I just wanted the leaders of our city to know about the work, the mission of Hero Fund USA to keep our first responders safe and to provide funding for their families in times of line of duty tragedies and critical illnesses and line of duty fatalities. So with that, I will ask if there are any questions, and if not, I'm done.
Let's start down here, and let's start with Councilman Culpepper, and just come on down the line.
Yes, thank you so much for coming out tonight, and I'm glad that you took the opportunity. A lot of people are not aware of this organization and what they do, and I know you've been in a lot of places and helped a lot of people, so I thank you very much.
Well, thank you. And one thing I do think that needs to be said is, and I'll use Blue Springs as an example. I think the city does a tremendous job of providing a great myriad of safety resources for the first responders. The police department and Central Jackson County Fire does as well. But there are still things that are needed that there just simply isn't an infinite amount of funding for. Everybody works on a finite financial budget, and we do at home, and I know the city does too. So there's so many things that are needed today to help keep first responders safe that just simply there's not the funding for. We don't believe every problem needs to be solved by some governmental entity, all due respect. We believe that we as private citizens need to roll up our sleeves and get busy and do the work.
You're next.
Daryl, I want to thank you for coming in and making this presentation, and you've come a long way from the back office of Chuck Zuber's to get to where you're at. That group of friends couldn't pick a better person to head this up. Your heart's in the right place. You've got a good mindset. You do good work. Your goal is to help people, not to build up a revenue or a war chest of money in the back office somewhere. You put the money where your mouth is and where the projects are. And I can't think of a better organization and a better run organization that's out there than you.
Thank you, Councilman Edmondson, and all due respect, the volunteers, we're grateful for the volunteer leadership we have. They really guide the ship and put us on the right course.
Yeah.
Councilman Carter.
I grew up in a cop household, so this hits very close to home for me. So thank you. I echo what they say. If I can do anything to help you, I want to help. I've done some things to help raise money in the past, and I'm happy to do that as well. There's something going on in our society, and I don't know what it is, but this is in the news a lot. KCK, our firefighters who were killed in Kansas City, down in Clinton. I mean, it's happening far too often, and an organization like yours providing the tools that these agencies need, as well as survivor benefits. So I'll put it out there. If I can do anything to help you, please don't hesitate.
Thank you, Councilman Carter. We pray every day and every night that every first responder throughout Missouri and Kansas gets to go home to their loved ones at the end of their shift. March 9th at Lunar Bowl, we are doing a fundraising event, our second annual Strike Force Bowl-a-thon to raise money for first responders. So I may take you up on your offer. Thank you.
Councilman Fowler.
Yes, thank you for your service. Nationally, I think I'm going to echo a little bit, but first responders has just been more and more challenging as time goes on. It's great that you had the vision to set this up and be prepared for everything that's going on these days.
Thank you, Councilman Fowler. We believe we are blessed. Thank you.
I just want to echo our thanks for you being here tonight. You and I had an opportunity to talk and kind of what set this in motion to have you present, because I was not aware of the organization until I saw an article about them helping Lee Summit, and then found out you're right here in Blue Springs in our backyard, and that our police chief is on your board of directors. So I think, as you said, the notification that you exist and what you're doing is important. And also, we kind of talked about with the Alumni Association for the Citizens Police Academy, you and I talked about some opportunities maybe for them to partner, because we've donated some items of equipment to the Blue Springs Police Department as well. One thing I wanted to mention that I think you referenced, it's a completely volunteer organization. I think you said even as executive director, you have no salary. All the board of directors donate their time, so there's no overhead costs. All the money goes directly to the mission. I think that's a big deal.
Yeah. Councilman Levesey, thank you for your interest in our organization. And the total volunteer thing actually changed at the beginning of this year. Our board of directors, and I'm a member of the board, they went behind my back and voted a little monthly stipend for me. We've been doing this for a couple of years now, and we appreciated their kind gesture, but we are predominantly a volunteer organization that puts our money where our mouth is, and we pay our administrative costs out of an entirely separate pool of money that is primarily funded by our members of our board of directors. And so we were proud of the fact that nearly 100% of every dollar donated to Hero Fund USA goes to help first responders and their families. Thank you.
Appreciate you being here.
Councilman Kaler.
I just want to appreciate Daryl coming and letting everybody know. The first time I met you was over at doing a ribbon cutting when you received some funds, and got to know you there. I also, like Dale Carter, come from law enforcement, except I was the one in the household doing the law enforcement. A lot of times we do not really realize what the families go through when a hardship comes on. And I would like to thank our chief also to be participating on that. I appreciate your interest in being involved. And I will say ditto for the rest of the council.
There is one thing I do want to say, and we talk a lot about coming to the aid of families when there's been a tragic accident, a death, and what have you. But you do so much more than that in providing equipment to try to avoid those types of situations. And that's what, when you and I spoke, that's the thing that really impressed me the most.
Well, that's an interesting point, and one of the things we noticed was when there is a line of duty death, as an example, the 2 firefighters in Kansas City, Missouri, that lane gets really crowded really fast with very, very kind-hearted, caring, concerned citizens that want to help those families. But what we realized early on in our organization, we're the only car in the lane providing safety equipment, preventive measures, if you will. So just like the drone for Lee Summit, we would much rather see a news story that a drone got shot or damaged, or we'll buy them a new one. We'll replace that. We want the first responder to be able to go home at night and be with their family. So.
Okay, we'll close it out with my comments that First Lady Eloise and my first grandchild turned 29 today. And on her 29th birthday, she's going through another phase. And so she lives in California, and she's just, on her birthday, had to go through another phase of interviews for a California corrections officer, which is law enforcement, because she has to go through the academy and all that as well. So, and some of you probably know that at the end of my military career, I was a military police officer. So it's near and dear to me as well. Okay, let's get to mayoral announcements. And before we get to the quote that I normally do, over the last 4 or 5 days, the country and this area as well has celebrated Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. Had he lived, he would have been 90 years old on January 15th. But his life was cut short by being assassinated at age 39. And I think most of you know the history, but I attended a luncheon on Friday, a celebration in Kansas City down at the Marriott. Then on Sunday, we do and have for a number of years done a city-wide Martin Luther King celebration. In the last few years, it's been at the First Christian Church on 15th Street. And I was fortunate to have some people from the city in attendance there. Mayor Pro Tem Susan Culpepper was there. And from the Human Relations Commission, we had the chair, Marjorie Major, and Jane Bowerman. So that was a nice event. And then last night, we had the Olathe NAACP Awards dinner. And there, and he has for the last 3 years, I believe, Chief Muntz and Officer Blahoot was in attendance, as well as our new prosecuting attorney, Tracy Chapel-Vick, and her assistant, Melinda Clark Sand. So that celebration is now concluded, I believe, as of last night, as far as recognizing a great American that I call the drum major for social justice. So I will end tonight with a Martin Luther King quote. And I think it's very relevant, and listen to the words and think about what it says. And I quote, "In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends." End quote. Don't have anything else in the no visitors appearance form, so I would accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Councilman Fowler?
Aye.
Councilman Carter?
Aye.
Councilman Edmondson?
Aye.
Councilman Culpepper? Councilman Kaler?
Aye.
Councilman Lovesay?
Aye.
Mayor Ross?
Aye.
Motion carries.
We adjourn.